Okay, so let's have a look at Unreal. So we're going to be using Unreal very, very early on. It's going to be something we start off within the first few weeks, first couple of weeks, I reckon. So those of you who've never used Unreal before, biggest thing, it's free. You don't need a special student license. You don't need anything like that. We are an Unreal partner as well, so if there is any problems, I'm sure we'll be able to sort it out. But really, it's a free software, so download it. Unless your computer can't handle it, there's no reason why you shouldn't have it. So I'm going to go through thinking that no one's used it whatsoever. So no one's used Unreal. I've downloaded Unreal. I've opened up what they call the Unreal Launcher, which opens up this, and it's got a lot of stuff in here. You got the store, you got news, you got library, all this kind of stuff. I don't really care about any of this. I just want Unreal Engine. So I'm going to click on Unreal Engine and then click on library. This is going to bring up everything. So I've got stuff. You got projects I've been making, projects I've been working on, stuff for videos for the classes. So I've got a lot of stuff going on mine. You will have nowhere near as much. You'll have nothing on yours. First thing we want to do is make sure that we've got a version of the engine installed, and it's generally going to want to install the newest version of the engine. It's good to always work on one version of the engine for this. Stick to one version and just do that, and try and stick to the one that we're using in the school as well. So if you're starting building something in, say, 5.3.2, when you come home and install it at home, make sure it's 5.3.2, which is very easy because when you click install version, you can actually come up here and before you install it, say which one you want to install, and then you click install. So yours is probably going to be a newer version of 5.3.2. I've just not done an update in a while. So you wait for it to install. It takes a bit of time. It's a big piece of software. And then when it's installed, you won't have this install plugins thing, or you shouldn't have anyway. When it has been installed, just launch it. So I'm going to launch. Now, the first time you launch Unreal Engine, it will take a bit of time to load up. You'll hang on this viewport screen for a while. And I don't think it's going to crop up on my recording screen. No, it's not. And I can't move it, unfortunately. Yeah, you'll get like a little banner that pops up that's got like a cool logo on it, and in the bottom left you'll see it installing stuff. It'll probably hang on like 45 or 75% for a while the first time you use it, because it's literally having to set everything up behind the scenes. And this might take anything from 2 minutes to, say, 20 minutes. I've had some people say it's taken like 20 minutes, but their computers are on the lower end of things, lower strength. Cool. So when it's done that, you'll be agreed with this. So these are all the things that we can do. So recent projects, you can see all the stuff that I've been doing. You've got templates. So these are all game-based templates. These are all film-based templates: architecture, automotive, simulation. Obviously, we're only going to be looking at the games, and we're going to be building our scenes from scratch. You can go and make any of these if you want to have a bit of a play. Just fun. This racing one's quite fun to actually just have a bit of a mess around with. But we're going to use blank, because we're going to build everything from scratch. Plus, it means we have to look at stuff a bit more. So we've selected blank. You'll see here blank. On the right hand side here, you'll see project defaults. Blueprint. We want to make sure this is set to blueprint. You've got C++ here, or Blueprint. These are basically just two programming languages we can use. And because none of us are programmers, we're going to use Blueprint for if we need to use anything, which will be, maybe some of the more spicier of you who want to push these hells a bit more. You might do a tiny bit of blueprinting, but we're obviously we're not going to be making a game. Target platform, desktop, just because we want to get the best results visually as we can do. Quality presets, maximum. Yes, we want to make sure that's maximum. Starter content and ray tracing. So starter content will give you a pack of stuff to play with, and I'm going to take that on for now, just so I've got something to show you. How to do stuff inside of Unreal. But when you're making your own projects, you might as well take starter content off, or make sure it's not turned on, just so you're not bringing in excess information. Now, ray tracing is a way for us to improve our graphical quality of our stuff. Especially if we're doing like really, really nice, not necessarily always hyper realistic, but it's mainly to do with lighting. Ray tracing can only be done on ray tracing cards, RTX cards. So if you've got a GTX graphics card, you cannot do ray tracing. If you've got an RTX card, you can do ray tracing. I'm going to turn mine off. I have got an RTX card, but I'm just going to turn mine off because I don't need it for now. I'm just thinking you can turn it back on later on anyway. So all I've done is basically, when we actually come to do stuff properly, we'll probably have nothing turned on down here. And we're going to, target platform, desktop, quality preset maximum. Awesome. Underneath there, we've got, what's the name of my project? So let's name the project. Let's call it, I don't know, Showcase. And then we've got the destination. So yours might be at first a really weird, like Unreal Engine obscure folder somewhere. Because I've already preset mine to the desktop, it remembers. But all you got to do is click the browse for folder, choose your place where you want to put it, and then it makes sure it's there. Easy. And then I'm going to create. So again, create will bring up that little banner again, which is just on my other monitor. So I'll have to bring the scene in when it's done. It takes a bit of time though, again, because it's having to rebuild everything. It has to compile shaders. So mine's currently hanging on a 45%. I'm also bringing in that starter content, so it's having to compile all that information. So again, first time you do this, it's probably going to take a little bit of time, but every time from there, unless you're bringing in something really crazy with it, it'll get faster and faster, or it'll be the same time kind of speed. So there you go. Boom. So now we are in the default Unreal Engine. So welcome to Unreal Engine. This is, if anyone's used Unreal before, you'll be familiar with this, or if you've used Unreal 4, it's similar, but a bit different. Now I'm going to just reset because that was my personal kind of setup that I like having. Okay, so this is the basic UI. So if you remember back to our Maya video, we've got something similar. So over the top here, boom. Oh, my tablet's all wobbly. There we go. Boom, we got similar stuff. We got File, Edit, Windows, Tools. We got similar stuff, and this all just contains basic stuff. File, opening project, saving levels, exporting, importing, editing again, Windows, basically what we can see. Tools. So we'll be coming into this quite a bit, especially into Windows, because there's maybe stuff in like Outliner or cinematics we'll want to look at. But unlike stuff like Maya, unlike stuff like Photoshop, because you can do many different things in those softwares, the top menu sets always seem to be quite complex. Because really all we're making is games inside here, this top menu set is actually quite simple. Underneath there, you would have a tab setting or a tab system. Currently we've only got one tab open, so there's only this, and this is a level. And all these are color coded as well, and icon coded. So if you had like a level, some material, some blueprinting, you'd have a different color and a different icon on each one of those tabs. Underneath here, you've got save current level, open current level, different ways we can affect things. So selection mode, landscape mode, foliage. So you can create landscape like this has been done here. You can create a landscape. You can paint foliage. You can do very, very basic modeling. It's kind of crap. You can do some fraction stuff, brush edit. So stuff we can do inside here. This is something we've got to get used to looking at and working with. This is the quickly add to project button, and it's just basically a quick access to bring stuff in. So if we want to bring in light, if we want to bring in certain volumes, we'll do it from here. We got blueprinting stuff here, and if we ever come to use it, we'll be looking at this. But this is like a little drop down for blueprinting. Again, quick access for blueprinting. The world cinematic stuff, we'll be using this a little bit, but later on to do kind of fly throughs and learn how to make nice cinematics. Plays a level. Platform basically says what platform we want to go on. Again, very, very basic. So save, open browser editor, choosing how we're working, adding stuff to scene, affecting our blueprints, affecting our sequencing, our video making essentially, playing it, and then a platform. Oh, and you got settings over the far right hand side here. So if we need to change anything inside the world settings or the project settings or plugins, it's all going to be inside here. So coming down to the workspace. This is the workspace. Very, very good. Top left here, we've got a few settings. So you can change some settings here for field of view, show FPS, some kind of like debugging stuff on screen. You got the different camera angles you can use here. as well as everything's pretty much got its hotkey to the right of it as well. So that's very good for those who really like using hotkeys. These are the different ways we can actually see the environment. So the lit is obviously shadow, light, highlights. Unlit is no light, we're just seeing color. Wireframe is we're just seeing the wireframe. Detail lighting is, it doesn't really make much of a difference here unless I go from detail lighting to lit. You're going to see that we get color. Detail lighting is essentially all the really cool normal maps and all the stuff that gives it that really nice information, but just no color information. And then show is things we can actually show or not show inside the scene. Very easy. Right hand side. So this is where having done Maya first is going to be very useful. Q, our selection. We can actually see it swapping as well. Q is our selection. W, translate. E, rotate. R, scale. Very, very good. Nice and simple. Again, you can hover over, you can see, so select is Q. Translate, select stuff is W. Oh, that kind of stuff. To the right of that, you've got, if you want to rotate or move stuff in world or in object mode, and we're going to look at that later on because that's useful for when you're moving stuff around. Control how objects snap to surfaces. Again, that's going to be useful. We're going to look at that later on. Now, let's actually come down, just do some stuff. I'll show you how to navigate around in a little bit. So we're just going to do this first. So I'm going to add into the scene a basic shape cube. Oh, there's a cube in our scene. Hello, Mr. Cube. Now when I move this, you're going to see that it's kind of jumping. It's not moving very smoothly. That's because it's moving 10 units at a time. And I can click on this number and I can change that to be like I can change in 1 unit, so it'll be very, very subtle. I can move it being 100 units. Or 1,000 units. See that? It's kind of, there you go. If I click on the blue grid, it turns it off. So now I can do very, very smooth. There's basically no snapping in here. There's no snapping whatsoever. I can turn it on, and then we got snapping. Same thing for the rotation. So rotate. Currently, I'm snapping to 10 degrees, or if I'd snap this to like 45 degrees. So I can only snap to like 45 degrees. Again, that's very useful if you want to be very, very precise with stuff. You know, it could be whatever. Or if I turn it off, I'm completely open with my rotation. I can be as finicky and subtle as possible. Same thing for my scale. So currently we're set to 0.25% of my scale. So when I scale up, it's going to kind of like snap in certain scales. Again, I can change that to be whatever I want. Or I can turn it off, and then I've got free reign of my scale. Now I've brought something in, and I've kind of rotated it around a bit. There it is. Lovely rotation. So this is where, if I go to, say, move, you can see my gimbal is kind of not super great. Well, it is super great, actually. Because that's what it's done. Is it's not following the world. It's following the object. So because I've rotated it and I've moved it, the gimbal is also being sympathetic with that. It's also moving with it. So I know that this is my front face here because that's the front face. Now if I click this little icon here, so just where we've got scale, rotate, selections here, just to the right, it says cycles transform gizmo coordinate systems between local and whatever. So if I click that, so we've got a little globe on this icon. Now we're at world position. So if I want to move, like rotate something so it's a bit of an off angle, and then move it relative to the world, I just have to click that to go to object, just like that, and then click it again to get the globe up to get global. Very nice. And that obviously relates to any of these functions. Apparently not with scale though. Whatever. Cool. Now, while I'm navigating around, I'll also tell you how to navigate, and I'll do some writing on the board again. So, navigating inside Unreal is super easy. It's actually quite fun. Ooh, that's the wrong pen. That's an actual pen. This is what I want. Right, so, what's a good number? I'll get black. Okay, so navigating. Everything's based off holding the right mouse button. So, nope. Hold right mouse button, and then plus W, A, S, and D. So just by holding right click, I can kind of tumble around, almost like I'm in a first person as well. So I'm not tumbling around something, I'm almost like I'm moving ahead around. Like so I'm actually a player looking at something. So if I press W, I move forward. And it goes in the direction in which I'm facing, so I'm going to go up, and I can go down. If I hold S, I go backwards. Again, in the direction, so I can look down and press S, I'm moving backwards, upwards, move down, or move up, look up and move down. There you go. A, I'm strafing left, so I can again move my camera. D, strafing right. It's all good. E goes, like, sinks down. Where's my pen again? I keep losing my pen. There it is. And you got E for going down, and Q for going down. Blech. Q goes down, and E goes up. There you go. And that's only if you're holding right click, obviously. So holding right click and pressing Q goes down. Holding right click and pressing E goes up. So you're almost like just flying around the scene. Very, very quick and easy. Left mouse, holding left mouse. Holding left mouse button. Plus nothing else. So there's nothing else I'm holding down here. It's like a drag. So what I'm doing here is I'm holding left mouse, and if I move left and right, again I'm in this kind of first person head mode, I can look round. But notice as if I'm pushing forward, I'm not looking up or down as if I would be if I'm holding right click. Pushing up and down, I'm looking up and down. In this case, with left click, I'm basically moving forward. I'm almost like in walk mode. I can actually do that with WASD as well. So Q and E still goes up and down. W still goes forward, S goes backwards, but I'm almost like in walking mode. So holding left mouse and pushing forward and back, and pushing forward and back. Moving left and right, I'm basically turning my head left and right, and then pressing WASD is I'm moving forward, but I'm not moving because I'm not changing the angle of my head. I'm not actually moving up and down. And middle mouse is pan. Nope, it's not plus anything, it's just pan. So these two are similar. Holding right mouse, holding left mouse, quite similar. Now something else I can do as well, while holding right mouse, and this only works if if you have a key like a tracker pad. I don't think you can do this unless you got a special tracker pad. But if I'm holding right mouse and then middle mouse button scroll, and it's going to be useful if you're working on small or big scenes, so I'm holding right mouse and I want you to look at the top. I want you to look right here. Right there. Top right of the screen. So if I'm holding right mouse now, you see how the numbers are changing. So I'm scrolling up, I'm scrolling down. What these are camera speeds. So if I scroll this really low down, see how I'm moving incredibly slowly? Because I'm moving at like the slowest speed. If I scroll it up and go to 10, then I'm flying through. So if you're actively navigating around a scene, and you're spending ages, you need to quickly go somewhere, holding right mouse, scrolling up to a higher number. Or if you need to subtly go through stuff, holding right click and scrolling down. So you can actually do it while you're flying around as well. So I can so if I'm, oh, there it is, I'm looking for that. And then as I'm coming in, I can slow down. So that speeds up the camera movement or slows down the camera movement, depending on what you're doing. Very useful. Okay, so let's write that information down. Let's make a note of those, because really that's all we have for navigating. It's very, very simple. The only other one is because of how they build the control system, we don't have a normal like drag marquee box to select a lot of stuff kind of thing. So there's two ways of selecting multiple things like that. Sorry, I had a thing in my throat then. So Control plus Alt, select box. It's not as common to need to do this inside of a game engine most of the time, but that's when you can actually click and drag a box over everything, and obviously everything gets selected inside there. Selection box. And then holding shift, you can do multiple selects. So that it'll be hold shift. So hopefully everyone's computer literate enough to, computer savvy enough to know about some of these, like holding shift and selecting things as a multiple select thing. Okay. So make sure we get those written down. Make sure we make a note of those, and have a play. You know, have a swing around. The scene we're in at the minute as well is like the default scene it gives you. This isn't where we're going to make a lot of our stuff at all. We're going to build our scenes from scratch. But this is just a fun test bed. You know, you can get used to flying around. There isn't any controls in here as well, so there's not even... So it gives you a, like, so pressing play does give us a kind of control, but it's more like a free-flying floating control. So I'm not actually a first-person camera. I don't jump, but when I tap space, as you would normally do, I raise up. But then, yeah, using WASD, I can fly around. So yeah, well, press escape. Cool. So make sure you wrote them down. Let's get rid of them. So now it's time to actually make our own scene. And we're going to do this just because I want to show you what goes on with the other menus and how we can adjust the UI for our own benefit. Because we've not spoke about anything over here or anything down here just yet. Okay, so I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to New Level. I'm going to click Empty Level. And I don't care yet. Don't save because I don't need to save anything. Cool. So we're now in a new level area. This new level has nothing in it. Okay, so just like in Maya, this is a fresh scene with nothing in. Just a behind the scenes of how game studios work. It's rare that everything is going to be a brand new scene from scratch like this anyway. There'll be, if you know you're going to have multiple levels which have the same kind of visual effects, same kind of, you know, what we call post-processing happen on the camera. If you think of anything like, okay, a level, like a game where you go from fantasy forest to cities to mystical realms, you know, mystical realms is going to be hazy and it's going to be purple. The camera, you know, the color keying on the camera is going to be different. The city is going to be desaturated and a bit foggy. The mystical forest is going to be saturated but kind of dark. There's going to be like pre-set up scenes, levels that a senior will do, or maybe even a junior sometimes will do, so that when people come to build levels, you don't have to rebuild everything from scratch again. They can basically just say, okay, I'm going to use that template, but we're going to build it from scratch. So what's happening on screen? very similar to Maya, we've got an outliner here. So this outliner is everything inside the scene. Everything inside the scene lives inside here. Currently, there's nothing in the scene. We've got this untitled editor here, but nothing's in the scene. So what I'm going to do is add a basic shape. I'm going to add a cube. Okay, now we've got a thing in the scene. We've got a cube. And then underneath there, we've got the Details tab. And the Details tab is basically everything to do with this object. It gives you position, it gives you material, it gives you lots of different things. There's lots of things inside of here. And 99% of them are all to do with things that relate to blueprinting. For us, again, it's going to be very, very basic. We're going to only use the tools that we're going to be using. And if you feel spicy enough to have a look around, do it. So, one big annoying thing that I don't like about Unreal is that when you bring something into the scene, it brings it in the same position in front of the camera. So it doesn't bring it into the middle of the world. It brings it basically 300 units in front of me by 80 units above me. Well, if my camera's here anyway, it basically moves it position-wise in front of the camera a certain amount of units. Let's say it makes an object in the middle of the camera, in the middle of the screen, 10 meters away from you. In this case, that puts it in world position 380. Okay, so here we've got location, so XYZ. There's something very annoying again that I don't agree with. Unreal treats their axis a little bit differently. And it's not that it's wrong, it's just that it's doing it a bit of a different way. They're treating their, it's almost like a bit of an engineering thing. Their y-axis, or the up-axis I should say, their up-axis is Z. It's the blue. And their depth axis is Y. The X is still side to side, so I've never understood why we're looking down the side of the scene here. We're always in a weird position. So X is still side to side. So really, if I'm looking at the front of the object, I need to be looking there. Oh, my camera is super fast. There we go. So I need to be looking like that. I'm looking at the front of the object here, and it's Y is the front, Y is depth, and X is still side to side, but Z is up and down. Really annoying. Just gonna have to get used to it. So we've got locations here. So I can set these all back to 0 again. I can go 0, 0, 0, and now this is in the middle of the world. You know. Rotation still works the same. So you still got rotations there. And scale still works the same, so you still got scales there. Now I believe the default, well I know the default working measurements of Unreal is meters, but I think the default scale of an object like this is a meter square, I believe. So this would be 1 meter square. I will have to triple check that. But these are same stuff as in Maya though. Position, location, all this kind of stuff. There's stuff up here. This is all filtering everything we see underneath it. So we've got all selected at the minute, so we're getting all the different options. If I just want to see the general things, I can click general, and then I've only got the general stuff, which might be alright to do actually, because that means that I'm not seeing anything that I don't need to. If I'm just dealing with like the physics, then I can just do the physics. So boom. And there's also, if you want to search for a specific thing in the details, you got that. But we will not have to do that at first. Mobility. Now this isn't about actually it's mobile, moving it around thing. This is all relating to lighting, and if you hover over a lot of this stuff, it'll give you a breakdown. Mobility for primitive components controls how they can be modified in-game, therefore how they interact with lighting and physics. So something that is static will not be affected by physics. It'll also not be affected by, it'll have the best lighting because you can bake lighting. Stationary, I'll just, hover over, do a read. Well, you can all read. But at the beginning, we're just going to stick it to static, and we're just going to leave it as is. Static mesh. Now this is where things are really cool inside of Unreal. We can bring in something like this as a placeholder. If I know that I'm going to have a cylinder which is going to be replaced by a pillar later on, I can bring in a cylinder. I can bring in that right there. I can actively replace this object with another object, this static mesh. I could drag in another static mesh in here, and it's going to replace this, which is very cool. Material, this is a slot for our material. Very cool. Everything else is all about physics and stat and all this kind of stuff. Stuff that we don't have to worry about. But that's the basics of that. I mean, again, feel free to have a look through, have a look, read into what these kind of little pop-ups say. It's only ever going to be useful for you. But some of it does, a lot of it does relate directly to like blueprint and our world settings. So when we're bringing in basic stuff, it doesn't really matter. So, boom. You know, I've got a piece of geometry there. I'm going to move it up so it's on top of the wall, top of the floor. There we go. Now, one thing you might have noticed as well is there's no lighting in the scene. That's because, if I look back at my outliner, there is no lighting. We've only got a cube in there. So, if this was designed bad, this would just be black. You know, I just have a black cube here, which I wouldn't be able to see. So let's bring in some lights. I'm going to go back to that little drop in there, and I'm going to bring in a light. I'm going to bring in... I'll bring in directional for now. Directionals aren't the best lights. They're a bit boring. They're not very controllable. But they're okay. So you can see there, boom, I'm starting to bring in some lights. So now we've got shadow sides. We've got light sides. You can kind of see how the light's affecting the luminosity or the shine of that surface, the roughness. Okay. And then you can see here underneath we've got the lighting gimbal. Now, the thing about a directional light is that it only really works with rotation. It doesn't matter where I move this to. So I can move this around and it's never going to affect the lighting because it's infinite in all directions. But it's all about the way that it points and rotates. Do you know what I mean? So this is called a gimbal, or a gizmo as well. A gizmo. Actually, we can write that down. So, go to yellow. If I press G, hides gizmos. Which are going to be useful for when we do renders and stuff. It just hides, so I press G and I hide the gizmos. It also hides the floor as well. Which is obviously when you build a game properly, you don't see that anyway. Cool. So I'm gonna bring in a floor now as well. So I think this is a little bit, you know, maybe we need to, if we get lighting in there, we might as well get that lighting working properly. So I'm gonna go back to shapes. I'm gonna bring in a plane. Again, you see how it's putting it in the middle of the screen, kind of a certain distance away from me. I've never liked that. But what I'm going to do is just set that back to 0, 0, 0, so it's in the middle of the world. And I'm just going to scale this up to be like 100, 100, 100. There we go. So now you can see that lighting working a bit better. And in our outliner, we've got a few different things. We've got cube, directional light, plane. And they've all got different icons. So you can see that these little bricks denote the geometry. Obviously a little light means it's light. And then we can also turn on and off these objects with pressing a little eyeball next to it. Which is fun. So I'm just going to take away that directional light. Now you can see that we're in darkness now that we brought in a light. I'll bring in another light. I'll bring in a point light. A point light is one of my favorite types of lights. It's a bulb. But in Unreal I especially like the way that it lights the scene. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring in another light, another point light. Nice. Cool. So, I brought in a light, so let's have a look at some of these lighting options. So, again, we've got position stuff as per usual. We've got the filters as per usual, so I'm still going to stick it to all. But underneath here, we've got options, different options to geometry. So we've got intensity, 8-point CD. So the default setting for lights is candelas. You can change the different lighting type here. For now, keep it candelas. And literally, this number is just the intensity. So if I change this to 2, it's going to get a lot dimmer. Color, so I can actually change the color of the light, so I can make this into a red light, like a dull red light. The attenuation is how far light is getting thrown. So this could be a really powerful light, like an LED, for instance. So an LED is when you look at it, it's a very strong light, but it doesn't throw light very far. Its attenuation is quite small. But if you think of like a bulb that's in a front room, like a house, that bulb is lighting that front room, but it's not necessarily. You can still look at the bulb. It's not going to burn your eyes out. So you can change the source radius, soft radius. So all these different settings. That you can play with and see what they do. Some of them don't really do much. There we go. So that's basically making that sphere into a pill. That's quite fun because that's almost like a bit of a laser beam. You got temperatures, so you can actually, control if it's a hot light or a cool light, which makes more sense if it was white. There we go. And these are all degrees of Kelvin, I think. Is it Kelvin? If I hover over, it should say Kelvin. Yeah, which is like a temperature gauge. And then you can loads of different settings, loads of different things you can do. And then we'll delete that light, and bring in one of my favorite lights ever, rectangle light. So a rectangle light is almost like it's a, what do you call it? It's not quite a spotlight. It's a rectangle of light. That's the best way I can describe it. It's a rectangle of light. But I like this because you get a really nice fall off on the shadows. You get a bit softer shadow. You get some lovely bounce lighting on the inside as well. So some of these lights are a bit rubbish with the bounce lighting. This one's quite nice because you can, even though there's no walls back there, we're still getting a little bit of refraction, just like bounce light. In fact, I can set up something like that. So if I bring in these I bring in like another, do this. And I go, so now that's a little bit lighter because I've got a surface to bounce light off. Take it away, darkens in, bring it back. So you can see there we've got some stuff happening. Very, very fun. So one thing that's really fun to do with Unreal is you can easily set up like things to do paint overs, to do some lighting. It's you don't need to be using Blender, you don't need to be using Maya to do any of that. You can do it all inside of Unreal. Take out some really nice screenshots, and then start doing paint overs. So that's the outline and that's the details. Now for me, I love the fact that I can adjust this whole area a lot. Normally I'm actually working in this on my ultra wide monitor, which is I don't know which dimensions it's an ultra wide. It's very, very wide. So what I do is I drag. So when I can drag that tab off, it's a bit funny. These are a little bit funny to kind of work with. There we go. So the tab, I can drag it off, and I can actually dock it somewhere. So I can say, okay, I'm going to dock it on the left-hand side here. And I make it quite small. Because this is a little bit like Unreal, like Maya as well. So I can set it right there, because that's similar to where I have it in Maya. I can see everything inside the scene, especially if I've got a lot going on. And it also means that I've got a lot more stuff visible inside my details, and I can only just work inside here. Quite nice, isn't it? Okay, so that's the outline, that's the details tab. Now, one thing that we've not looked at is how to actually bring things that we have made into the scene. So how does one do that? I'll quickly just bring in a direction light, but I'll chill it out. There we go. So how am I actually going to bring stuff into the scene? Well, we need to find our content drawer. This is one thing about the new Unreal that I don't like. The default attitude, let's call it, of the content drawer. So down here, the content drawer, if I click that, it comes up. But then if I click on anything else, it'll go away. But I find that really, really annoying. The content drawer is where all our contents is. So with this, we've only got one. Well, if we just made this project and we didn't have the content starter content ticked, we'd have nothing here. This is basically everything that's inside the scene gets brought inside here. Custom stuff that we've made, stuff from whatever. What I am going to do though is I'm going to dock this to the screen, because I actually like having that up all the time. because then I can just I can pull it down or up depending if I want to see it. I just don't like the fact that if I click off it goes away. Some people do like it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click dock to layout. And there we go. So now it's docked to layout. Yes, I do lose a little bit more of my working space, but that's not a problem because I can adjust it like that if I need to. But now I've always got my content browser here for me. There we go. So let's have a look at what's like stuff is like inside the scene. So what objects look like inside the scene, how we apply materials inside the scene. Let's have a look at some of this stuff. So in my starter content, the reason I brought this in is because it gives us some basic stuff to play with. Basic materials, basic architecture, basic stuff. So let's look at materials, for instance. Materials is the funnest bit about this, I think. You get a bunch of stuff. And it's a bit messy to work like this, but you can literally just click and drag onto something inside the scene. And it'll say if I want to apply this marble ceramic tile checker flooring thing to this flooring here, I can literally click and drag it onto this flooring and it's going to apply it. Brilliant, right? And then if I want to drag and drop this metal, this material steel metal onto this cube, I can do that. It's a bit messy to work like that because you're not applying it in the most efficient way. That we will learn about as time comes on. Now, one thing I just want to double check. Can I do it inside here easily? No, I cannot. This is fine. In fact, what I can do is show you some cool stuff. Okay, so I brought in my flooring and I put some material on this flooring, but my flooring's only so big. I mean, it looks nice, you know, lighting looks nice, the object looks nice on top, nothing looks too big, too small. When we make stuff ourselves inside of Maya, we're going to be scaling it up to each other, so when we bring it in, it's going to be perfect. But what we've got here is it's only one little small area. Now I want to start making more of a floor to help me do some stuff to help to bring the scene out, to build the scene. Now I could keep bringing in, going up here, going to basic shapes, adding in a plane, adjusting the parameters and stuff. Move that out of the way for now. But what I can also do is hold Alt and drag. So I'm going to hold Alt and then drag. I'm going to do a quick duplicate. And what's even nicer is if I know how many units I'm going to move, which is going to be 50 units. So have I got 50? Yeah, I got 50. Boom. There you go. So the bigger I move this, or the bigger I make that number, the less snaps I'm going to have to do. So if I set this to say, is it 500? Yeah, okay, so every 500 units is a new piece of flooring. So I can hold Alt and then shift click these. Alt. You see how I'm making a massive floor now. So this is really good for when we do our scenes, when we're making our environments, making our props, because then we can quickly prototype. We don't necessarily need to have a perfect floor plan up at first. We can rough stuff out, we can go small, and then quickly add stuff later on, make adjustments, and it's very, very free. So I could literally make a little environment right now if I wanted to. I can make it like a little asymmetrical thing, which turns into like a walkway here. So boom. So I can start making these floor plans really easily. And when I'm making my own objects, I'll have specific pieces of flooring, pieces of walling, pieces of stuff to put in specific areas. So if I wanted, in fact, I didn't really need to. If I wanted to have a wall that goes across here, I could make a little triangle section to go here, or I could just kind of bring this over, and then later on put a piece of wall that goes from here to make a kind of a wall section. It'll all make sense. It'll all make sense. And I can even do that with lights. So I've got my rectangle light here, but I'm going to Turn that off. Ooh, spooky. And then I'm going to bring in my light to point light. I'm going to move that around to... Oh, I'm going to turn off snapping, actually, for this. Where are you? Okay, so you're there. And I'm going to hold Alt and drag you over there. I'm going to hold Alt and drag you over here. But I'm going to make you like half as dim. I'm going to make you half as dim. I'm going to grab the rec light. I'm going to make you very dim. And if I just pull you over it. So you can have lots of different fun. Lots of fun. Now luckily, this whole setup is very easy to understand at first. It's very easy to come in and start making stuff, because notice I've not brought anything in. You know, there's not as much to learn and admire. The stuff that we put in, the stuff that we do inside the scene, inside this whole area, that's what makes it difficult. That's what makes it, you know, complex. So that's the dirty way of bringing in materials. And in later sessions, I'll show you how to do like a proper economical way of dealing with materials. It's going to be a lot easier for us to deal with, because the problem is, if I bring in this white wall, I'm only applying it to that, and it's going to be really annoying if I have to go through and apply it to every one of these individually. It's going to take ages. Now, organization. You'll learn fast that I quite like organization with stuff, and organizing inside your outliner here, especially when you're dealing with a scene with possibly thousands, well, definitely thousands of objects in it. It's going to be a bit hard. It's going to be a bit difficult. So we can actually make things. We can make folders. We can itemize stuff, organize stuff inside of here. So you've got this little, on my outliner, wherever you've put your outliner, you'll have this little folder icon here. Create a new folder containing current selection. So what I can do is go boom. So I'm going to select all the geometry in the scene. I'm going to click this little folder icon. Boom. And then now all that is within that folder. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to name that Geo. I'm going to grab all the light in. I'm going to put that inside there. Lights. There you go. Bit of organization. Very nice. So again, very, really easy to do stuff. So let's bring in some objects into the scene. So back into start content, let's go to architecture, and we've got some walls and floors and stuff. So I'm actually going to go into my geo. I'm going to delete everything except the cube. And I'm going to start bringing in flooring. Now this flooring might look a little bit different at first. Because what I brought in before was just a piece of geometry. And what I had before and what this is, they're two just different ways of doing stuff. This one actually has depth. It's not just a flat piece of geometry. It's got actual depth to it. You can see here that it has depth. You know, which is going to be useful for certain things like lighting, so it doesn't do what we call light bleed. But what is happening, which I'm not a massive fan of for massive environments, is you've got one face at the top, but then you've got 5 faces that aren't being seen. And if you've got 10,000 floors, that's 40,000 faces that aren't being seen. Only 10,000 faces are being seen. But the big important thing is, and we're going to be learning about this in class, so don't worry about remembering it, is that the pivot point or the building point is in the same position, is in a corner here. Because again, with those flooring, the pivot point was in the middle, which is fine, but it's very hard to build stuff properly with that. What this has got here is something in the corner, so we can actually got stuff to snap to, or what we call register to. So I'm going to just turn off light in a sec. There we go. So here, what I've got is, I'm going to duplicate off there. So I've got a new piece of flooring. But if I hold V and then move my mouse near to the corner of one of these, it's going to snap to it. And it's only snapping in this direction as well because I'm holding that. If I'm holding the middle, it'll do it on any of them depending on where. So it just moves wherever and snaps to the nearest vertex to my mouse. This is something that happens inside Maya as well, using the exact same shortcut. So I can hold V for vertex, let's say, and I'm only going to snap to anything which is in the Y-axis or this forward axis here. Boom, there we go. Now that's useful because we might not necessarily have the walls and floors be in a snappable scale. You know, maybe like that. It's not wide enough. You know, 500 is too far. You know, so that means I have to turn that off. And having that in the corner basically allows me to build very efficiently and quickly. So I'm going to hold Alt, drag off a new piece, hold V, snap it into there. There you go. Now it does make it a little bit difficult when doing corners like this. There we go. See if I can get that working again. So there we go. It's getting cleverer and cleverer, this stuff, though, because even though the pivot point is right there, if I'm holding D and if I move slowly enough, it still, you might see like a little blue dot appear here. So holding V, dragging it towards there, and a little blue dot will appear. There we go. It's very hard to see, the little blue dot there. Basically, it's got two vertexes which are touching, and because I'm holding V, it's going to say, okay, we're going to keep those in the same position. And then I can quickly make some flooring. So these are all things that we would probably make ahead. Well, we'll definitely make ahead of time as well. So doors and flooring. So I can bring in a wall section there. And I'm just going to snap it to there. That's it. I'm going to bring this over to there. I'm going to bring in this. Like that. Is that in line? Nope. Annoyingly, that's not in the right position. Now, other ways to actually move around the pivot point stuff, I'm not going to bother doing that in this video because we're literally just introducing ourselves. But that is the reason why making these sit in the right position are important, is important. So the pivot points are in the right area on each object. Let's rotate that around. One of the last coolest little things, just while I'm building this, that I really like is if I bring something in and put it in. Why is it so low? There we go. So bring it in, and maybe it's high like that. It's too high. If I press end, it's going to move it down to the bottom of, like, to the. It won't do anything if I'm hovering over the void. But if I'm hovering over an object, it's going to basically move it down until it meets resistance. So, boom. See how it's moving down right there? So, oh, they're a bit closer to each other to do that. There you go. So I can, if I just want to bring something down to the same level as this flooring, let's move it up, and then press end on the keyboard, brings it into place. Now, because we're learning Maya and Unreal at the same time, hopefully you're going to see overlaps in a lot of this kind of information. Like, it's not completely, totally learning two new pieces of software. It's learning two similar pieces of software. There is a lot of similarity. You're still going to get confused at points, though. So I can just get that flooring, drag it into Geo. There we go. Turn on lit again. There we go. So where are my lights? Right, grab my lights. Bring them in. So again, we will make these kind of things ahead of time, and we'll be doing exactly that kind of thing to build these quick environments. To basically build a floor plan, we're literally, to learn Maya and to learn Unreal, we're literally going to build an environment. We're going to go from basically making the walls and floors to then making big objects, big props, big environmental props like pillars and stuff, and then working our way down to smaller props, because the smaller the prop is, generally the more complex it is, because they're more like focal points. So if you think about a piece of flooring or a wall compared to a telephone or something, the small telephone, like an old rotary dial telephone, is a lot more complex than a big wall. As I can tell, that shimmering is doing. So I'm pressing G there just to hide that. So that's cool, right? It's very, very cool. And again, just having to play with that kind of stuff. So the last few things I'm going to show you are all about like behind the scenes stuff. And I'm also going to show you why we might not just want to keep dragging, or we definitely don't want to keep dragging things onto it from, say, materials. Like keep dragging the material onto it from here. Don't want to be doing that. So if I go to architecture and I double click on this wall, I believe that's the door we used in it. 400, 300, yeah. So I'm going to double click this. This is going to bring up a new window that I can dock. So this is a geometry window. This is an object window. And you can see here that on this tab here we've got a tealy blue brick, which is telling me that it's geometry. Now I'm going to dock this onto my main window, because I can either have it as a floating window or I can dock it to make it a window as part of this. I just got to remember that they're all basically inside there. Now what this is, it basically shows us this object in a neutral area. It gives us all the information, and if we might want to make changes to this, which is kind of one of the reasons why I love Unreal. So I'll grab this wall. What are you? You're 400, 300. 400, 300, there you go. This wall, for instance. So I'll dock it in. This is our wall, and it's all set up right. It's all the kind of stuff. This is all the information for it. Super awesome. We can look through. This is like a debugging environment, so you can actually look to see this item on its own. But one thing I love about this is the material slot. So this is the material slot, not for what's in the scene, but what's in here. And this is why I love Unreal so much. And I'll do this for now. So I'll drag it off onto its own little window. So I've made the wall. I brought it in. I've started building the scene, and it's all good. I'm happy. We're looking good. But what I'm going to do now is say, right, okay, I'm going to apply a different material onto all the different walls, not just one at a time. All these walls, I'm going to apply a new material to. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to start object materials. So in the materials down here, I'm going to grab this concrete tiles here, and I'm going to click and drag. And when I click and drag, you're going to see that this turns blue, but you'll also notice that you've got a green little line at the bottom of them. Again, a lot of color coding stuff. Every different component has a different color to it. So some of the audio stuff is purple, some of the audio stuff is blue. The blueprinted stuff is a different shade of blue. Levels are orange. Level data is white. So materials, we've got green. Green's our material. So if I click and drag this, you see this blue. Blue's basically saying, I'm accepting this. So inside this window here, I'm going to click and replace that. So now I can see, okay, that's what the wall is going to look like with that material. Am I happy with that? Maybe not so much. Maybe I'll try this brick. That brick's quite nice. Maybe try this brick. That brick's quite nice. Maybe try this brick. That brick's really nice. So I can look at these and say, okay, I'm happy with that. You can see that this one is updating. Oh, they're all updating now. Cool. It does it automatically now. So you can see here that when I bring in a new material, it automatically updates that. So why I was saying that's really cool is that I think, because I'm still thinking Unreal 4 era, you had to basically import this, you drag a new material on, and then you had to save it, and it would then apply it to everything else. But now you can just do it on the fly. That's awesome. I love that. Boom. So that way, all those elements are all getting changed. And if I'm happy with that, I can say, okay, save. Now all those areas, all that element, that object in general is always going to have that material. So now you can see that icon slightly changed because now I've got that new material on it. Now what's there you go, that one. What's a bit of a thing to think about with that is if you're only dealing with one wall geometry, but that one wall geometry is going to have lots of different materials applied, lots of different types of materials applied to it. You'll just have to make, the basic way of doing it is making multiple versions of that wall, literally duplicating it. It could be the exact same geometry, but just having a version with this texture on, having a version with this texture on. There are more economic ways of doing it, where you would have an object, I'd say a wall, with what we call an instance material or a master material, and then you would change parameters on that master material for that one object, and it'll change. It's a bit more complex, but so I can do the exact same thing here. I can set up the same material, just check to see if it works, see if those line up properly or well enough that it's not going to do my head in. Yeah, that's fine. See that? Boom. And then do a save, and then last one. Another thing I love about Unreal is how easy it is to access some of this stuff. So, especially if you're dealing with lots of different objects, and you got folder after folder, and you got subfolders inside subfolders. Just trying to find this basic bit of geometry here inside all these folders can be a bit time consuming. If I select it inside the scene, and then where it says static mesh here, I can click on this little icon. It says browse to wall, so it basically takes me to that folder. Super nice. I love it. And obviously, again, you will get used to all this stuff. If you're not super computer literate, or you're not, confident with computers too much, this can, feel a bit intimidating. Obviously, I've been using computers for 3 decades, so I'm a little bit used to computers. Maybe you are, quite savvy with computers. A lot of this stuff will make sense. Some stuff, that cognitive, that logic kind of process might not necessarily make sense, but it will. It will. That's why practice is good. And what I'll be doing as well constantly, and when we come to do the proper builds, we'll be doing this, is I'll be setting up basically a mannequin, or I'll even be setting up, I might even go in with the first person template, not necessarily a blank template. I might start off with a first person template so that I can have a first person walk around. It's still going to be set to human scale. I think the mannequin is 6 foot, so it's still going to be set to a human scale. It'll just I'll be able to walk around and get more of a proper, player eyes view of it. Because we're going to be dealing with everything as if it was a first-person game. You can always, if you want to be spicy and do stuff in your own time, set up something like this. This is just a blank environment with no real setup. Set it up as if it was a 3/4 isometric style game. You can set up a camera. Super easy. And in fact, talking about cameras, no, not that one. Is it? One last thing I'm going to tell you about is, I'll tell you it now, but we'll probably forget about it and I'll have to tell everyone again. But that's cool. Yeah, okay. We can set up camera positions. Not necessarily just for rendering. Maybe this is for like when you're building a scene, you want to have a certain kind of focal position, a certain camera position. Putting a camera in that position and always being able to go back to it and say like, okay, how are we looking from this position? Especially if you're thinking from the realm of a player and you're thinking about, okay, if the player's coming through this door, do I want this to be a grand exposure of the environment, or do I want this to be more of a tense, small, what's the emotion you want to play? So if I hold Control and press 1, I can set up a camera position, and then Control press 2, Control 3, Control 4, and then so I press Control 1 for one position, Control 2 all the way to Control 4. I think you got up to Control 0. Then when I press 1, it'll go back to that camera position, 2, 3, 4. So I can do these really quick kind of jump arounds. So if I'm building stuff, I can, boom, 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 boom. Really, really fun. And obviously, when I move my camera around, I can just, it doesn't matter because that's a bookmark position essentially, so I can just press 3 to go back. Very, very fun. Now, the very last thing I'm going to show you, and again, don't worry about assimilating all this information at once, is some of the fun stuff we can do with what we call post-processing, or some of the other stuff here. So there's some terminology that we need to kind of be aware of. Volumes and pawns, although pawns might be on the programming, the blueprinting side of things more than anything. A pawn, P-A-W-N, is an entity that carries something. You've got actors, which is, so a pawn is a static object that doesn't do anything but carries parameters. An actor is something that has controllability and acts on something, like a player is an actor. And then a volume is a volume. If you think of it mathematically, it's something that carries a function that's not active in the game. It's more like a passive thing. So what I'm going to use here is I'm going to come down to volumes, and I'm going to come down to post-process volume. It's one of my favorite things, post-process volume. And then what you'll get is a little, whoops, there you go. You get a little box. Where's the box? Oh, because the gizmo's turned off. So they get your box. So this is a post-process volume. And on the right hand side here in my details, I've got a big menu with lots of different things. They're all very cool to look at, but it uses a lot of film and TV terminology. But again, very useful to know about, especially if you want to be a 3D environment artist, or especially if you're just interested in this stuff. But let's go through. So mobile depth of field, these are all basically things that we can affect the camera within this volume. So a mobile depth of field is a really lightweight depth of field, which is for mobiles. Bloom. So bloom is bloom. You know, you've seen that. We don't need to explain what bloom is. So I'm going to just turn on the method. So I'm going to keep it standard. I'm going to turn on the intensity. I'm going to ramp up the intensity. But nothing's happening. But when I go inside this volume, see the difference? So when I'm inside this volume, that's when the post-processing happens. When I come out of it, it doesn't happen. So I'll ramp up that again. So you can see there, boom, 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 boom. Exposure is how the player's eyes essentially adapt to light. This is a whole science, and we're going to have a look at a bit of a look at later on, like maybe halfway through the year. We're going to have a look at exposure and how to actually get the best exposure, because the default exposure settings inside of Unreal are kind of crap. Because exposure is such a big thing, this is all basically down to that. Chromatic aberration, something that I'm a bugger for using. So chromatic aberration, or broken TV syndrome. So you can see there, normal camera, broken TV syndrome. So chromatic aberration, I love it. It's that splitting of channels to give you these red, yellow and blue, so you can actually, you know, you can have a play. I like drunk vision a little bit. You know, in games when you're drunk, you sometimes get this going on, chromatic aberration. But you can see the same thing when I'm in or out. You can see this gets affected. So loads of stuff to play with there, and there's some stuff we can have loads of fun with. I might even go through. I might do a video going through every last one of these and explaining every last parameter. But it will be a long video, and there's going to be some. So inside of things like film here, slope, toe, shoulder, back clip, black clip, white clip. These are all it's ways to affect, but it's a terminology like actual film and TV, old-fashioned camera, not necessarily digital camera information. We're also going to talk about lighting, because lighting we're not really touch lighting at all. But one thing that I love about this is, yes, this is a little box, and it only works when I'm inside it. However, if I come down to the bottom, I got post-process volume settings. Bit of a mouthful. And at the very bottom you got infinite extent or unboxed or unbound. If I click that, basically everywhere in the world is being affected by this post-process volume. So if I know that I don't want to change, I don't want to have one room which is giving me drunk vision, another room which I'm, desaturating anything, what I can do is hide this below the map. I don't know why you do, but maybe. You sometimes see that when people build maps, studios build maps, you have a lot of stuff under the scene. I guess for debugging. But, you can see the auto exposure right there. See how it's get brighter? So if I go underneath and I come up, it auto exposes. We're going to have a whole thing about that. But with the infinite bound, it's just the entire scene. If I just know I want the entire scene to have something, you can also have multiple post-processing on it. If you think about this technically, you could have one post-processing that controls an entire scene, and then you could have another bunch of post-processing which does certain things. Maybe as you get closer to one of them, you get a desaturation. So as you get closer, it starts to get more kind of whatever. That's where you're getting into the realms of intermediate to complex and level building. Even from an artist standpoint, level building or even blueprinting might be involved in that. Especially if you want to be like shaking the camera, you have to do some blueprinting. What we're going to be looking at is, at first, is how we as artists can use Unreal, and also how we as artists should be looking at levels and props and stuff. It's not just levels. Even though we are going to be building an environment, it's just the best way to learn about all this kind of stuff. So that's Unreal. And obviously there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more that we're going to be covering. But really, that's it for the beginning. So just to remind ourselves what's going on with controls, you're holding right click and you can move your head around if I'm just moving the camera around. Or if I'm using WASD, I can move left and right, forward and back. Q and E go up and down. If I hold left mouse, I can push forward and back to basically move forward and back, or push W to basically move forward, and then Q and E still go up and down. If I hold right click and I scroll up and down, I'm speeding up or slowing down the camera movement, so I can whoosh, or I can be very, very slow. Now this isn't camera movements in the way of like showing off our scene. We're actually going to be using something else to do that. This is just like navigating around our scene. We've looked at setting up a level. We looked at some like adding basic stuff into the scene, some organization, what's inside the detail tab. Last thing actually, because we had a look at an object. Let's have a look at some materials. So I'm going to open up a material, and actually that's a bit of a complex. Let's go for a basic one. That's better. So this is a super basic material. You see the icon there is green and it's like a little checker ball, and you'll notice some naming conventions happen as well. So M underscore means it's a material. A lot of time we use SM underscore for static mesh, basically walls and anything that's not going to move. So this is a material. What we've got here on the left hand side is our preview. We've got like a save and apply and some other stuff here that we don't necessarily need to worry about just yet. The main one is apply and save. Preview, we can move around in there. We can change the different objects it is. Underneath here are some more parameters for our... this is our details tab. So what's actually happening here? So this is the material itself right here. This is what actually drives material. And the things coming in from the left here are what make what's on the object visible. This is a node-based network. Some of you might have already used this inside Blender. Some of you, obviously, who've done Unreal previously would know about this. But this is a way that we can basically plug stuff into our object or our material to make stuff. This is really, really basic, this one. Because all this is doing is using something called a vector 2, or no, sorry, a vector 1 to a constant vector 1. To basically control stuff. And this goes in part with what we're going to be doing inside of Substance Painter as well, because both of these use what we call a PBR texturing process, physical based rendering. So you got base color, metallic, specular, roughness, and then some other fun stuff. The main bunch of these top four, and normal as well, actually normal, but mainly the top four. What's really important. So This top one here is just controlling the value of this color. Now, a bit of science again is we're using something here called a vector 1, a constant vector 1. And a constant vector 1 is basically just like 0 to 1. 0 being black, 1 being white. So I can set this to 0, and I got black. I can set this to 1, and I got white. I can set this to 0.5, I get grey. Or I set this to 0.1, I get a darker grey. So that's, I can control my colour through that if I want to either be black and white. Again, this is super basic. Metallic. So again, metallic 0 would be not metallic at all. Metallic 1 would be absolute metallic. So if I want to make this like black chrome, I could go black and then set this value to 1. This is very metallic. But set my roughness to 0. It's so chromey, it's not doing anything. I'll set that maybe over. There we go. Okay, so maybe can I do that? No. Okay, so it even the chrome. There we go. So I think 0.9. So I've got a chrome material here because, and obviously I've been making a video explaining all this stuff anyway, but my metallic value goes from 0 to 1, black and white. 0 means not metallic whatsoever. 1 means absolutely metallic. So here it's chrome, but then I got my roughness, same jazz. 0 means there's no roughness whatsoever. 1 means it's like velvet. You know, it absorbs all light because it's so rough, like Vanta black. So where does that threshold kind of take me? Okay, so there, I've got 0.5, and it's like quite rough. It's quite rough. It's you might be able to see a little flecks of it struggling a little bit at the side. And they're just using black and white variables or values to control stuff. Which sometimes that's all you need. If we're not using certain parameters inside of, say, our painting software, we can just use something like this. How we make something like this is very easy. If I right click, I can then type in the thing I want. And yes, there are a ton of stuff we can do, and we're going to use a fraction of them. But like I said, that was called a constant vector. So I called constant. Constant. Yeah, you go. A constant. So I don't even need to be a vector 1. Constant. Just a constant. Boom. And that a constant is just 0 to 1. The other constant we'd use a lot is a constant 3. Or a constant 3 vector. And that's colour. That's XYZ. RGB. Boom. So then I can actually choose a colour on that one. So let's make a nice magenta sphere. So that's a constant. So I've got this. This is the thing that controls the colour. Now actually plugging it into this is very easy, because you can see these plugs, that we call them, are plugging into where they want to go. So if I want to plug this into here, all I've got to do is drag in from the white, which contains all the different channels, drag it in to the base colour. Boom. And now we've got a bright magenta. A bright magenta chrome sphere. There you go. So now we've got the most shiniest of magenta chrome spheres. Very, very easy. So we can use colours, RGB colours, inside base colour because it's set up for taking that kind of stuff. For things like metallic, roughness, specular, ambient occlusion, those are all black and white values. In fact, a lot of these opacity, it's a black and white value. Some of these are colour values, some of these are black and white values. Again, you'll learn about all this kind of stuff. Oops, daisy. Very soon. So navigating around this, I've been moving around, doing all this kind of stuff. This is very easy. Right click is pan. And then you can do middle mouse scroll to zoom in. You can also do right click and left click at the same time. Do the same thing. So right mouse to pan, either middle mouse scroll or right mouse, left mouse scroll to zoom. Oh, not even scroll, left mouse, right mouse, just push in and out to zoom in and out. So that's a really basic material. So let me do that from scratch. So I've got, oh, that's why, because there we go. So first of all, I'll just turn off the post-processing bound, because that's going to get in the way. There we go. So I've not saved or applied anything yet as well. So this is the material that I'm kind of messing with, this M asset platform. So you can see that I've applied that. Now also imagine that I've been doing this the same way. So I've applied this to multiple different objects using that kind of thing we looked at before, going into the object, putting this onto that object so it gets applied to all those instances across the scene. And in fact, I'll just do that now. I'll make a point to whoop, and then whoop. There we go. So all those are carrying the exact same material. I've changed a few things, but I've not really saved anything yet. So I'm going to apply. So you can see all those have changed. And I'm going to save. That means that this is now locked in. This is saved. You'll see this little asterisk. Anything that changes on an object has a little asterisk next to it. Once you save it, that disappears. Basically just says, I've not been saved. So I'll just... Now obviously, if you're using two monitors, this is going to be... Or if you've got an ultra-wide, this is going to be much easier. I'm having to do this in one monitor, and my smaller monitor, because recording on my ultra-wide is a bit of a faff. But now you can see there. I've got my view there, and I've got my thing there. So I'm going to... This is basic material work as well. I'm going to make sure that it's moderately metallic and moderately rough. First of all, so right click. I just want one of those constants, that 0 to 1 thing. So I'm going to start typing in constant. There we go. And I'm just going to Control D to duplicate one of those. So Control D, just like most things, it duplicates. And I'm going to plug this one into roughness and this one into specular. So now we've got super shiny things. Okay. Metallic inside of Unreal works really weirdly. It's something that not a lot of people are particularly happy with. So when we come to do this kind of stuff again, we will go over this kind of stuff. Okay, so I've got them two values in there. So I can change my roughness to be moderately, something like that. Okay, like a rough steel ball. So then I will apply. You see how reflective that surface is. Then I apply that. They all get changed. That's all good. But then I want some color applied to it. So I'm going to go in for a constant vector 3, and I want to apply that in there. So currently it's black. But then I just want to change that to be like orange. And then I can apply that. And now they're all orange. There's one other thing that I'm just going to show you for fun. Emissive color. It's quite a fun one to use, this one. Because I can... If I want this to be a glowing orange, I say glowing, it's not really not actually going to be glowing. But if I want to have all these being glowing spheres, I can take that color and plug it into the emissive color. Woo! So now we've got kind of like, they do give off light and they do glow, but they're not, they've not got the parameters that like lights have got. They've not got as much control, but they're really good for small little things. If you're doing like flying bullets, or if you're doing like little glowing pickups, neon lights are good for this. So the great thing about an emissive color is it doesn't matter what's underneath it. So I'll duplicate and I make this. So it's currently orange, but I'm going to make this a completely different color, like green. There you go. So there's a very slight change there, just because I think the underlying color, but there's no actual change to the color. It's still this orange color, and that's just using an emissive color. So now we're back to that normal. I can use another one of those constants, so let me just grab this. I could plug this in. This is just going to turn it white, probably. Yeah. So now I've got bright light, white lights. So that's quite fun. That's the emissive color, the emissive material slot. That's quite fun. You know, you can have fun with this stuff. And again, these do act like lights, but they're just not as controllable. Yeah, they're a bit fun. They're a bit fun. So that's a really, really basic material. And I'm just doing very basic controls to make it do stuff. There you go. So let's have a look at a more complex. Let's go for something that's really complex. See if we can break it. Oh, mid-complex. Let's go for bricks. Okay. So this is where we're getting a bit more complex. So a lot of these starter materials as well are all built quite complexually. So it still all goes into a material node at the end. It's still the exact same thing, but this is set up a little bit more kind of complex to do different things, to do better jobs, to do more complex jobs. So what have we got going on? We've got reduce macro, we've got macro, we've got the actual stuff, we've got this normal texture. Okay. So this is the simplest part to kind of explain. It's still not super easy to explain. But again, this is it. When you first start using this stuff, it is like, oh, this is too much. Don't worry about it. So what's happening here is we've got the color map right here, we've got a null map right here, and then we've got a what we call a pack texture, and the pack texture contains multiple different textures through channels. So you can see they're taking the red channel out of one of these. This is going into the roughness, and this green channel is going into the ambient occlusion. There's nothing in metallic about this. There's nothing going into the metallic value at all. But if we come backwards from here, we've got basically texture coordinates or tiling. So this is controlling the tiling, and this is then helping that tiling work. This is distributes it to the different materials. Then from here they go into their own. Basically, if I change this, long and short of it, if I change this, it's currently 0.5 tiling. If I change this to 1 and 1, I'm going to be tiling an extra half. Is that updated? Oh, probably need to update this actually. I'll do it on the one that they're actually using. I think they're pretty much the same. Yeah, they're exactly the same. Okay. Okay. So this first texture coordinate here is my overall tiling. So I can come in here and I can actually start to adjust how much this tiles. Which is good for if you slightly miss the mark. I mean, we shouldn't have any odd numbers inside here. These should actually be tiling, so you can't have odd numbers in tile. But you know, if we're only halving the texture and stuff, that's all good. Okay, so yeah, that's just this first node is just controlling how much it tiles. And like I said, this is basically just then setting up the controls to basically position it in the world, and then your different settings, going to normal, going to color, going to roughness and ambient occlusion. And on top of this, we've also got other information. We've got all this noise here, which is getting put onto the surface, almost like an overlay, like in Photoshop, like a multiply layer. So if I do that, rotate the lighting around. There you go. So, boom. So if I do this and this. Okay, so you see how this is now getting like vertically streakier? It's because that was pretty cool actually. It's because I'm adjusting the tiling of this particular noise, which is getting distributed over the surface. So what they've got here is they've got noises that they brought in. They're basically building a material on the actual surface like we would do inside of Substance Painter. It's just that this is done in the back. This is basically what's happening in the background of Unreal Painter, Substance Painter, where we're actually applying it by hand. You know, on a technical level, this is what's happening. It's just in here we've got the option to kind of like mess with it. They've built up the textures from hand. They've got like a really basic like wall texture here. It's actually quite impressive. Again, technical stuff. We're not going to worry about it. But that is where we're actually going to leave it there, because now we're an hour and a half. So another long video. A lot of stuff to go into there. But the best thing we've done really is just getting in there and having a play, bringing in some lights, bringing in some you know, simple geometry, building a scene, bringing in that starter content. You know, have a play with what's inside here. Again, just go in there and start messing with stuff, having a look at stuff, opening like, what happens if I do this? What happens if I bring this in? Apparently it freaks out. There you go. What happens if I double click it? Oh, look at that. You know, have a play. Because we're going to start easy, we're going to start simple, but we are going to ramp up in complexity quite quickly. But it's going to be easy, it's going to be fun, don't worry about it. Just a lot of stuff to learn with both these softwares. So that make sure you've got all your notes, obviously, just like in the Maya video. Make sure you've written down all your notes. This is a free software that's available for everyone. Hopefully your computer can run it. If not, you just kind of have to learn it. You have to use it in the school, or you know, use your brother, sisters, partners, whoever's, uncle's computer, whatever. Just make sure you get into it. You know, practice, practice, practice. There's a lot of stuff to take in, but when you start using it, it all starts to assimilate. And then we'll be talking about the other stuff as we're actually using it, or the more complex stuff, or the more complex way of working with it. Cool. See you in the next one.